Alright everybody, now I have to be a little bit quieter than I have been for these first 6 days. I've got a toddler sleeping in that room. I've got an infant sleeping in that room. So I'm going to sing the song, but it's going to be kind of quieter. So this is a piano version, if you know your musical terms. On the 7th day of NESmas, NESmaker gave to me the ability to create a HUD. Oh, it's so soft and sweet and beautiful now. We're going to talk a little bit today about the HUD area and the boxes and the gameplay area of your screen. That's going to be our main focus. And there's going to be some important concepts that we want to talk about in terms of a scrolling game versus a non-scrolling game. So first of all, know that right by default, this is your HUD right here, this area that's in the dark blue. If I go to my HUD and boxes node here over in the hierarchy, I can see I've got these boxes that I can set up. These are default box shapes that I can set up to be different things for my game. For instance, let me turn on a screen that is, what was it, 4.5? I can't remember where my screen was. There we go. So this is my actual screen. If I want to see what it looks like, I can use a demo screen just to see what the HUD would look like. But the HUD is going to look the same over all of your screens. So with this area right here, I can make it a different size. I can click and I can drag a different size. It's a little hard to see because it's a white rectangle. I can say, okay, I'm going to set my HUD, and now that dark rectangle represents my HUD. I can also click and drag and set my gameplay area, and so this rectangle represents my gameplay area. This becomes the top bounds. So when I actually collide with the bounds, it's colliding with right here. I could also, have no HUD, and I could turn off the HUD on a different menu, screen by screen, but I could select the entire area and say, make that my playable area, and now the entire screen is playable, so I literally have to move all the way to the top of the screen to trigger the bounds. So generally, by default, NESmaker comes with its modules where this is my HUD area, and this is my gameplay area. Okay, what we can now do is we can fill this with information. This is good on a module to module basis. So for those of you who are making a game that scrolls, using this sort of HUD, which is a background based HUD in a scrolling game, is inadvisable if you are a beginner user. It is totally possible, but it involves using something called the Sprite 0 trick. So let me explain what that is so you're aware. When I draw a HUD, basically I'm drawing this part of the screen independent from this part of the screen. Like I'm drawing this part. When the screen loads, it's going to draw the screen, and then it's going to draw this right here. And it's going to draw those tiles to the background. If I start to scroll, if my camera starts to shift, that doesn't move these pieces. So it's going to disappear off to the left of my screen, just like these trees are, just like the snowman is. It's going to move right off the screen, and this blank spot is going to take its place as I scroll on to the next screen. All right. So what we have to do instead is we have to trick the game into saying, okay, no, I want it to have a scroll value of 0 up until this point, and then I want it to scroll as normal. And there's a trick. It's a trick used by games like Super Mario Brothers that involve a special condition where a sprite overlaps a background. The first sprite being drawn overlaps a background graphic, and that triggers a bit to your picture processing unit. That bit can be read to say, okay, here's where I want you to reset the scroll. So we set the scroll to 0. If we see the bit actually has collided, if there is a sprite and background tile, as soon as it sees that collision, or that overlap, I should say, not collision, I'm sorry. As soon as it sees that overlap, it says, okay, yep, it was hit. So from here on, now let's set the scroll, and it sets the scroll for the rest of the screen. It's a little bit complicated. It was one of the things that we had by default in 4.1, and it was one of the things that everyone broke their first time out and got super frustrated with. So what we've done is we still have it exporting all those values. So if you ever want to go down that road and look into Sprite 0, you can absolutely add it to your game, and we even have a graphic user interface way in order to add it. So it is totally possible. But what we are going to talk about today is not that. We're going to talk about using a HUD on a screen that is static. So think Legend of Zelda, where it's a screen at a time, and you get to the next screen, and it moves over, and you get another screen at a time. So the HUD is always sort of permanently placed in one spot. That's what we're going to talk about today. If we were talking about platforming games, we'd want to look into the Sprite HUD instead of the background HUD. So that would be that sprites are being drawn to the screen with an offset, just like your player is being drawn to the screen with an offset. They're being drawn in screen space, not in world space. So as your camera moves, they're being drawn to basically the camera view. So sprite HUDs are better for scrolling games. The only problem is you have a limited number of sprites you can draw. You can't do a big, thorough HUD like in Castlevania or something like that with using sprites. But what you could do is think Mega Man. Mega Man had a very sort of minimal HUD, right? And it had like how much ammo you had left for that type of weapon, right? And so that was very minimal, and it was aligned vertically. So you could do something like that. That's a sprite-based. That's a great example of a sprite-based HUD. Anyway, talked about a lot of concepts here. I just wanted to show you this area. We're going to talk a little bit about text boxes and giving a narrative in another tutorial. But for right now, I just wanted you to see what we're doing. We have set a HUD area and a gameplay area. If you're using a background HUD, you can put that HUD anywhere you want. You can make a vertical HUD. You can make half the screen the HUD. You can make the bottom of the screen a HUD. You could do whatever you want, especially if it's background based. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move into tiles. Right now, we have no tiles for our HUD graphics. They don't exist in the game. So I'll go to my pixel editor. I'm going to open up. And I can see right here, I've got one called HUD. I'm going to open that. It's blank right now. Now I'm going to make a new tab, and I'm going to open up that new tab. If I go into 4.5.x tutorial assets, beta tutorial assets, graphics, community graphic assets, I believe in one of these, you know what? I gave you guys an updated version of this, so I'm probably not going to see this in my update, but you probably will. So what you probably see is this, and I'm sorry for this that mine doesn't match. You guys have 4.5.9. Your tutorial assets look like this. You've got tutorial graphics and you've got community graphic assets. I'm going to open up tutorial graphics, and I can see I've got one called HUD Graphics BMP. I'm going to open that. And now I've actually got graphics for my HUD. I could just select all these, Control C, and I can come over into my HUD and Control Shift V. And I can save that, or if I want to make sure I can save as, scroll down the HUD, save. Yep, I want to overwrite it. Cool. So now I've got graphics for my HUD. If I go back to my HUD in boxes and I go to tiles, I'm going to see that they would update. I think the reason they're not updating is because I've got a white background and white text. So let me do this. I'm going to my pixel editor. I've got white background and it's trying to draw the blue text, which is white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a color like this. So my HUD will show up like this. It was showing up like this. It's using my fourth sub palette by default. So that's what I want it to look like. So I'll do that. Save that. The palette's being saved. I'm going to go back to my HUD and boxes. Now if I go to tiles, there they are. And what I can do is I can say, okay, what do I want my blank tile to be? Well, I want it to be that. What do I want 0 to be? Well, I want it to be that. And I can also do set, I can do set numbers. And I can choose 0. And it's going to run 0 through 9 and set my numbers. I can go to set letters and I can find A. And it's going to do A through Z. Then I can say, okay, a period is here, space is here, a colon is here, a question mark is here, exclamation mark. You can see they're already set, comma, quote, dash, ellipse. So now this has like open parentheses and users and things like that. We also have space here that I could put things like a heart to show how many hearts I have left or whatever, lives, and a little avatar of my character. So there are more things I could do. By default, this is the size of your HUD area. You have this much graphics to work with. There are lots of clever ways that you can get around that limitation and use screen-specific graphic sets and things like that and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Right now, we're just going to stick to sort of the default. This is meant to be a beginner's tutorial, so we want to make it sort of easy and sensible. So Then what I'm going to do is I would go into HUD Assets, and what a HUD asset is it is a set of graphics that is static. It's not going to be changing. It's not a variable amount. So if I had like a picture or something and I had graphics of my avatar up here, I might make a HUD asset out of it, and then in my HUD elements I could draw that asset. So just for kicks, I'm going to show you guys how that would work. I'm going to add one, and I'm going to call this one, I don't know, selector or something. Call it whatever you want. I'm going to make it too wide and too tall. And now I'm just going, too wide and too tall. And I'm going to put these selection graphics in place here. And now I've got this sort of area that I could put like whatever weapon I have or something like that in my HUD. It could go inside these little brackets or whatever. Not really going to use it for that purpose for this simple tutorial, but as you go through the module tutorials, you might see things like this. All right, so now I go to my HUD elements. So what I have is I've got different types of elements that I could use. Tiles, HUD Assets, text, and a number. We're going to talk about what each of these does. The first one that I have is my HUD Assets. That's what I just created. I just made that HUD asset, and I made one called Selector. And now I can position that wherever I want using this simple sort of system. So now my HUD element 0 is going to relate to this selector. Not what I want to have happen with this, but we're going to take a look at this. Not what I want to have happen with this in this tutorial, and we'll talk about why in a second. We already have some values that the maze game tutorial wants to draw to the HUD and to element 0. But for right now, if I test my game, you can see I've got something drawn in my HUD, just like what I have in my HUD elements. Okay, so really cool. We learned how to draw something to the HUD, and this is going to be true on all my screens. If I go to my next screen, my HUD reloads when I load the screen. Very cool. Okay, but let's talk about what's really going to be there for this game. I can draw a lot of things. So I can draw the value of a word. I could draw a word. So let me just draw a word. Troll steal Xmas or something like that. Okay, so now I can put this in place, and now this is just going to draw this as an exact word. Whatever it sees here in the string is what it's going to draw. Press play. And there, now we got trolls steal Xmas. Awesome. So now I could also draw variable tiles. So this is one of the more complicated ones to understand. It's going to look for a variable, and we need a variable for it to draw. So I don't know what variables this game has. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to go into project settings. I've got user variables, and this is generally where I'm going to find the variables I'll want to use for the HUD. And look, I've got some things in here that we're going to make use of. I've got my lives and I've got my score, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 my scores. Why? Each one of these variables is going to correlate to a place value for the score number. It's going to be a 6-digit score number, and we're going to talk about that when we get to it. But first, let's draw my lives as a variable tile. So remember, the variable is called my lives. If I have it say my health, it's going to give me an error. Watch this. And it's not going to like that. I don't think I have my health in this game. Maybe I still do lingering in some of the 0 page stuff, but I got a feeling it's going to give me a hard time. It says value out of range, value out of range, value out of, it doesn't like this stuff at all. What I'm going to do, if you ever see this error, we talked about this before, but if you see this error, that means the game did not compile because there was an error, and the last interface showed me where the error was. And this lets me know that, oh, I tried to open it in the emulator, it couldn't open. Yeah, it didn't open because it never made it, never created it, so it couldn't find it to open. Just hit OK. And so now what I'm going to do is I don't have a variable called my health. I do have a variable called my lives. And spelling is important, capitalization is important. What's the max value for this variable? Well, let's say that I have a max value of 3. Okay, I can only have 3 lives, and in fact, at the beginning of the game, it's 3 lives. What does it look like when it's full? Well, let's say it's an up arrow when it's full. What does it look like when it's not full? Let's say it's a down arrow when it's not full. Now, what this will show you generally is, however many the max value is, it'll show you sort of a split the difference. It'll show you full values and empty values, just so you can see what they'll both look like. This doesn't denote the starting state. What I should see at the beginning of the game is all 3 of these are set to the up position. If I go to user variables and I look at my lives, the initial value in the game state starts is 3. So all these should be up. Now I can move it into place. Let's just say these are my lives. So now when I test my game, now it went with no problem, and you can see they're all up. Okay, so that's great. Now we want to draw the value of a number. So I need to draw a number. That's the only one we haven't done yet, right? We've done variable tiles, we've done an asset, we've done text. The value of a number. I need to know what variable I want to draw. If I look at user variables, I do have a variable called my score. It's my score and then my score underscore 10 and then my score underscore 100. This doesn't, you don't have to do this way, but it's going to be consecutive. So it's going to look at this, the ones place, then 10's place, 100's place, for however many places. I could call this my score. I could call this I hate variables. I could call this NESmaker sucks. That's what I could call these variables. And it's still going to show them, this is still going to be the 1's place, 10's place, and 100's place. So I like to use this as a naming convention. I know all of these are working with score, and I know I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places for my score. So the variable is called my score. It's got a max value. It's saying how many places in this case. 4, 5, 6. That's what it needs. And then I'm going to place this like right here. And right now when the game starts, all of this should be 0, because if I look, my initial values, oops, user variables, they're all 0, right? My score's initial value is 0, my score 10's place is 0, etc., etc. So now I'm going to test my game, and this will be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. But we're going to notice that we're going to run into a major issue. So I'm going to play. We already made the character die, right? So now something horrible is going to happen. And some of you guys might experience something like this if you're starting to play around with the HUD. So let's run into the bad guy. Not going to be good. Oh, I just completely bashed out of this. It didn't even do anything. It just completely aired out. The emulator just completely exploded. Let's try that again. Let's watch. And then we're going to talk about why. We're going to start thinking about how we can tech through problems here. So, yeah, and now it's frozen. Like, what the game's frozen. It's not just my player's frozen, but the monsters stopped moving, all this stuff. Why? What did I change? Well, I changed the HUD. Something's going on with the HUD, and it's happening when my player runs into the monster. So let's check something out here. Go to my project settings. I'm going to go to script settings. I'm going to go to common handle player hurt edit. We looked at this script. Remember, it's our new script, our maze troll base here. And what I see is this. So we're doing something with the HUD right now. We are going to decrease the variable value for my lives. And then we're going to update the HUD element that's supposed to go with my lives. Right now it's 0, 1. Well, where is my lives here? This is 0. This is 1. This is 2. Ah, I changed the order from the maze game. Now what I want is, instead of trying to update HUD element 0, 1, which would be this one, I want to update HUD element 0, 2. So I'm just changing the number of what HUD element is being updated when it comes to lives. And now we can read the rest of this that we skipped reading yesterday. I'm going to decrease the variable for my lives. I'm going to update the HUD element, which means on the next refresh of the frame, it's going to replace the graphics. It's going to redraw the graphics for this variable, whatever is sitting in element 2. In this case, it's the variable my lives. And what it's going to do is my lives is set to a variable tile. So it's going to create basically full and empty lives. And it's going to draw based on what I have, however many full lives versus how many empty lives I have. Then it's going to load that variable, and look, if it's not equal to 0, if I've lost a life and I'm not out of lives yet, go ahead and jump to not 0 lives. But if I am down to 0 lives, reset the game, right? So it's when I'm out of lives, game's over, I reset the game. So now I'm going to have 3 lives to start the game, and when the game's over, I'm going to reset the game, and that's how I'm going to know the game's officially over. So let's check that out. Come back and test the game. I will lose a life, but something will still be askew. So let's check it out. Excuse me. So here's my lives. I run into the monster. Boom, worked. Oh, but wait, it reset it. Why did it reset? I didn't lose all my lives yet. Well, let's think about what we have happening with the player. It changes to action step 7, right? When that is over, what does it do? Well, let's take a look at my player real quick. When it runs into the monster, it changes to action step 7. When that action's over, it restarts the game. If it restarts the game, that's like hitting the reset button. It's not what I want to have happen here. I want it to reset the level, not the game. If I reset the level, then if I'm out of lives, it'll reset the game. So I'm going to reset the screen, restart the screen instead. So in my end action, instead of starting the game over, I'm just going to start the level over. Now it will preserve that HUD variable. It will preserve my lives. So I lose the life. It'll stay lost when the room restarts. It'll only reset to 3 when I press the reset button, when I reset the game. So let's check this out. There we go. Lost a life. Stays lost. Lost a second life. And if I lose this life, now the game's going to reset. And we know because I got 3 lives again. So cool. We've just set up a working lives system. Now it's much more fun to go through my game when I'm resetting the levels and I don't have to start all the way from the beginning again and all that stuff. And I can maybe preserve score and I can get lives. Maybe I could even create a power-up that gives me a free life. And we'll look at that in a couple days possibly. But for right now, let's add a score. Let's talk about how to add a score. Now there's a couple things I could do to add a score. I could make a game object over here that I can make it a power-up type game object, and then I can place the power-up in the room. I can make a certain case for when my player runs into that power-up, and then I can make certain power-ups that can be score and certain power-ups that can be lives and all that stuff. Those are things that I can do. What I'm going to do right now, though, is I'm going to make a new tile type that handles, it's a prize, but instead of taking me to the end level, it's going to make my score go up. Okay, so and we're going to sort of look at how to write this one ourselves based on what we already know. So we're going to dip our toes in the code a little bit again, but once you have the script written, you can then access it in your other games as well. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to go to my pixel editor and I'm going to open up my let's see, my background screen specific character 00. So right now I've got a NES game there. Let's make a cartridge too, or a present too. So I'm going to just get my rectangle tool, and inside that rectangle tool I'm going to make another rectangle, and then I'm going to make, I feel like I'm making Toe Jam and Earl graphics right now. They had the la 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 presents, Santa Claus flying around, really crappily making a present. I could make it, give it some dimensionality if I wanted to. And then maybe this. Okay, fine. It's not great. It'll do. I get it. It's a present. I'm going to hit save. Now I can go to my overworld, and I'm going to place a few of those presents. It might take a second for it to pop up, but I'm going to place a few of those presents here and here and here. Bad placement for game design. I'd want to put them down here where the monsters are, but since we're in testing mode. Now, if I right click, I'm going to escape so that I don't see my ghosted image. If I right click on these, what attribute do I want them to be? Prize? Yeah, but that's not what prize did. We rewrote prize so that it goes to the next screen, right? What we want it to do is we want this to go away and we want it to change into it's collected. So let's take a look at that prize script. I'm going to go to script settings, scroll down. I'm going to look at tile prize maze based troll right there. Okay, it looks like I am adding value to the score when I do get to the prize. The only problem is we made our game do other things. Instead, we changed it to a different action step, which ended up sending us to an additional level, right? So what we really need is I'm going to hit File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Prize Maze Base Troll Pickup. What the pickup's not going to do is it's not going to change my action step to all of a sudden going like this and then take me to another level. This is just going to be a pickup. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm not going to have it make me stop moving. So I'm going to get rid of the stop moving. I'm going to be able to walk right through it. Now what it's going to do is it's going to do everything else the same. It's going to change tile where at 0, 0, and it's change tile position. It's going to change it to the 0th tile and the 0th collision type, which is walkable. So it's going to disappear. It's going to turn basically into snow, and it's going to become walkable. It's no longer going to be a prize. Then it's going to add value to my score. Now, if you remember, let's go back over here and actually look at this, because we might have to update our other script too. Oops, let me get this all on the screen here. If I look at my macro, I'm just going to pull this up so I can pull up the macro. If I look at the macro, right, it needs to know how many places this value has. My score had 6 places. The home variable is my score. How much do I want to add? 1. And what place do I want to add it to? 2. This is the 100th place. So 0 would be the 1's place, 1 would be the 10's place, 2 would be the 100th place. Update HUD element 3. Uh-oh, is that where we have score? Maybe it is. Let's find out. I'm going to go HUD and boxes. I'm going to look at my HUD elements. 0, 1, 2, 3. Number for my score. So element 3 is where I've got my score. Awesome. We're already all set. If I had my score, if I had this in some other element, I would have to change what element I'm updating. The other thing to note is that this doesn't have to be the variable my score. If I went into user variables, I could add a new variable called whatever. Give it an initial value. And I could then change the value of whatever. Okay, so these names are only good for the game that you're creating, which is why if you start making modules, it's really important that you understand this stuff if you want to start making your own variables and all this kind of stuff. So what should happen now is when I get to, I'm going to save this. I need to actually make this into a type of tile as well. So I'm going to go to script settings, tile types. I've got one called prize. I'm going to make another one called prize pickup. This is different than the prize, which takes me to the next screen. Takes me to the warp. That's what happened when I touched the prize and I stopped and I started doing this, and then it takes me to the next screen, right? Here, though, I'm on a new one called prize pickup. Again, this is just changing the name. If I really want to include this in my game, I got to go to script settings. I got to go to tile type 6. Oops. Go to game. Go to Maze Troll Xmas, Tiles, and you should see it right next to it. This is where we saved it. Prize Maze Base Troll Pickup. Now, tile number 6 is going to do this code, which is the same as this code here, except instead it won't stop my character from moving. It won't make him jump to that other action state, which means it won't act as a warp to my next screen. So it'll do the same thing. It'll add a score, whatever. So let's check that out. And in order to actually see it in action, I'm going to have to set those tiles. Overworld. I want to make this prize pickup. Make this one prize pickup. Make this one prize pickup. Now, I get the prize pickup. Watch my score. 100, 200. What if I die right now? Still 200, 300, 400. When I go to my next screen. Awesome. When I get this, it will also go up because I still had an add score on that as well, if I remember from the code. And I made it to the end with 600 arbitrary points, whatever that meant. So that's some basics on how we can use the HUD and how it works in tandem with variables that we create. It talks about the different types of HUD elements there are, from the assets to the text to the number variable to the pictorial variable here, the variable asset. Hopefully that gives you some idea of what's going on under the hood. And when you start working with the tile and you get things freezing and you get things whatever, HUD is a very good candidate to look at. Make sure that you are pointing to the right, your variable does exist, and that you are updating the correct HUD element when whatever happens, when you run into the prize or when you run into the monster or whatever you want to have happen. Make sure you're updating the correct HUD element in the script. So I hope that was informative on how to start using the HUD for static screen games. This is me jumping up and down and saying, don't try and do this exact thing for a scrolling game unless you are really advanced to this stuff and understand how to set up Sprite 0. There might be other tutorials that show how to do Sprite 0 with 4.5 point whatever, and other users might get to it before we do. But for those of you especially just getting started, and since this is geared towards you, don't even worry about this type of HUD for a scrolling game. We'll show you how to do a Sprite-based HUD, or you can actually watch the tutorials on the those types of all the scrolling games, and it shows you in those medium and advanced levels how to do Sprite-based HUD. So with this, I just want to make sure that you knew how this worked and why and when all these things did what they did. I hope that's helpful, and I will see you guys all tomorrow for day 8.